how do we learn about relationships? Like, is it normally from our parents and the people we see around us, or we only, we kind of develop our own ideas of what relationships are? And
I think to refine your question, who should be teaching us about relationships? Because where do we learn is, we know, TV, social media, parents, other people we've seen dating, etc. But the question is, who should be teaching us? And that has been changing over time. Depending on where you come from, the church or your religious systems that you grew up in will be the ones that teach you. Your family structures, your cultural background. Today, almost everything in how we live is based on where we invest our attention capital. And if you're investing your attention capital to TikTok short clips or to a specific relationship guru on YouTube, back in the day, maybe like an Oprah or Dr. Phil, those people then sculpt how you view relationships and what you think right and wrong is. And then it becomes conventional in society. Who should be teaching us about relationships? I think should be a function of leadership that wants your society to thrive. Someone who is practical, and where you speak about marriage and sex, they must be able to articulate exactly why you must move in this way and how it benefits you. And currently, it's all about short-term pleasure. That's why the porn industry is so big. That's why the sex industry, never mind porn, is big. Everything is sexualized, from food to clothing. Everything is sexualized. Sports is sexualized in the way that certain athletes are given certain outfits to look a certain way. Does it add value to society? And if the answer is no, then we shouldn't be moving in that way. But we don't have the best relationship gurus. We don't have people who are saying, date like this, marry like this, have sex like this, because this is in your best interests. And then we find ourselves where we are now. A lot of cheating, a lot of what we call outside kids, or kids from outside of the nuclear family that are being raised without a dad or a mom. We find a lot of depression, suicide, a lot of misery and heartache, which inspire romance novels and romantic comedy movies, and which is great, but is it building a great society? The answer is no. And we just don't have the discipline. And we don't have the systems which we used to have in the church and culture, which punish you for deviating from what's best for society.
So, movies usually propagate the idea of people meet, fall in love, and then, they live happily ever after. And at some point, we see certain relationships where you think it's just fair enough and actually desirable for someone to walk away from the relationship, right? And so what do you think the idea has been built around how relationships should be, and how do people receive such ideas of how relationships should be? It's like the whole idea of, diamonds and, the value that they bring to relationships and stuff.
Shout out to De Beers.
Yeah, that marketing was amazing. It was crazy.
Before I answer, your thoughts on who should be teaching us in relationships and why?
You spoke about TikTok, right? I think we have a lot of individuals who influence us, but then we haven't built the idea of thinking that these are the 5 people who are inspiring me. The way I think, the way I act, the way I behave, the way I see the world. And it could have been family, but the challenge is most of our families are broken.
Correct.
Right? And so it becomes really tricky. And then it's like, where do most, for example, young people spend their time in, right? Social media, TVs, movies. And I think in a way we cannot disagree with the fact that that's where most of their influence come from, right? And I think it should have been families, in all honesty, because there are people who would say, I grew up with my parents and I never saw them fighting even once. It doesn't mean they're not fighting,
sure,
right? Just fighting behind closed doors. And some of the stuff that kids end up learning from their parents. There was a session yesterday, I think I spoke to you briefly about it, and one of the sessions was about trauma and how it transferred from parents to kids. And so, if parents haven't healed their trauma, then they're going to obviously transfer it to their kids. And, that's how their kids are going to be influenced. And I went to boarding school since grade 4.
Jeez, that's a long time.
That's a long time. So I spent most of my time in boarding schools. And at the end of the day, you hardly spend enough time with your family, with your parents. You end up obviously watching movies, lots of TikTok, lots of videos. And honestly, that's where the inspiration comes from. And that's why I asked the question of, the impact that movies and the whole idea of happily ever after influence our view and perception on relationships. Because most of the times, if that's the way you see relationships being portrayed, then that's how you think they're going to be. And so, there are times where you're in really toxic relationships, but you just can't walk away, right? Because you're like, this is the idea of relationships, right? I need to stick around. I need to be there. And, And so I think it should have been family, but unfortunately our families are broken. And so...
Do you think church leaders, politicians, other so-called moral leaders should be allowed to curate social media? Like, there's certain countries like the Middle East where pornography is banned. So you can go onto a porn site and it doesn't load, which is now forcing your society to be better. Do you think those people should be allowed to, social media, number one, maybe even the law? If you get a girl pregnant, which would happen maybe culturally, you're forced to marry her legally. So once everyone knows in society, then you will not sleep with a girl unless you know that you're willing to marry her. Do you think those guys should be allowed to influence, or do you prefer what we have now, which is being liberal, where people have their own freedom to make mistakes, get burnt, get hurt, etc.?
I've been thinking about the same. Looking at religious leaders being on TikTok and Instagram and posting content. I mean, it's religious content, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, should they be in such spaces? Right? And I think it goes back to the perception that we have about social media.
Yes.
And most of the times when you think about social media, it's entertainment, recreation. Obviously, there are people who go to social media to learn, basically learn. And even the people that they follow are individuals who they learn from. But it's tricky. I think it's tricky because where are young people, right? They're in social media. And how do you get them? You follow them where they are, right? And so... I think it looks and sounds a bit weird seeing them on social media, on TikTok, for example. But I think they should have the freedom. I think they should have the freedom.
The kids?
You are talking about the kids?
No, I'm asking if you think those leaders should be allowed to sit together, let's say in a country, and devise that we will not allow our social media, let's say in South Africa, to have swear words. If the swear words content gets taken down. If someone says something blasphemous against Jesus, we take it down. About Prophet Muhammad, we take it down. No porn, and they curate the way we... Do you think they should be allowed?
That's interesting.
Or are you happy with the freedom we have now, which includes pain?
I don't think you can ever have a perfect society.
Yeah?
And, for example, Burkina Faso banned porn, right?
Sure.
Yeah, they've banned porn. I think...
That's recent.
Yeah, that's recent. Yeah. I think there's just certain things that they can be banned, Like, obviously, people are not they're not gonna like it. But look at, some of the... Okay, well, you wouldn't call them all great leaders because people thought that, these guys were evil. But I think some of the things that they did, despite the fact that people probably wouldn't like it, contributed to their societies becoming great societies.
That's what a strict parent does.
Exactly.
They limit some of the nice things, but for your benefit, out of love.
Yeah. I think it should be the same way, right? Because even freedom has its limitation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Freedom can be very destructive.
Yeah. Have you seen 1984?
I've read the book.
Yeah.
George Orwell.
George Orwell. I think it's
my favorite book.
It's really nice. I'm reading it right now. Freedom is slavery, and then what's the other thing?
Yeah, there's a couple of quotes there.
The
paradoxical quotes.
It's so fascinating, right? But I think, there should be limit to what people can be allowed to have access to.
Sorry, you were asking a question. I don't know if you remember your question, but it was still here around relationships and movies and the like. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. The other one is ignorance is strength.
Strength, yeah.
Yeah, okay. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. And ignorance is strength.
1 second. Oh, shoot.
What a rude host. Siyabonga.
Pero,
it's my second time here. Guys, it's me again. If you don't know me, then catch up.
You should know him.
No, I'm kidding.
There goes the introduction. Anyways, it's good again to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
You're someone that I really love having on the show because people are like, I don't agree with that guy. I'm like, cool. The idea is not for you to agree with him.
Yeah.
Just listen to him and then think. I think that's the whole idea, So it's always nice having conversations with you and chatting and sitting down. It's been a year since we last recorded, and it really doesn't feel like a year.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Imagine if we can do this as a tradition once a year, maybe even twice a year, and then in the sit down speak about our growth and our experiences. I think that would be really dope. It doesn't have to be with me.
Yeah.
It can be with whichever guest you see on a regular basis of, this time last year I was doing this time last year, and this is where I am now, so that people that watch are like, oh snap, the guys have grown, or they've changed, or they've become whack, and that's pretty dope. Penuel the Black Pen, I'm honored to be here again, man. Our first sit down was quite magical. A lot of people have said to me that it's one of their favorite sit downs with me, which means there's something special about you and this platform. And I fully agree with what you're saying. And it's one of the things I appreciate when people come up to me. Hey, bro, there's a lot of things I don't agree with. And I'm like, the fact that you don't agree means you're thinking. And for me, that's good enough. I'm not trying to get you to believe and agree with everything that I say. But the fact that you listen to me and it makes your mind uncomfortable and it challenges you and it forces you to either interrogate and agree or interrogate and disagree. But it's like, I've actually never thought about that. Now I have. And now I'm actually going to do something about it. That makes me happy.
Thank you for taking your time being here. I really appreciate it. I think the first time we met, I don't know what... I think you briefly highlighted what, inspired you to come to the show. I was still just getting started.
Yeah.
And I think in a way you also gave me your platform, and the opportunity to also have a wide reach, given the audience that follow you. And I think that the idea is to challenge minds, right? I mean, even if we don't make you think differently, at least we make you question what you think.
Yeah. I don't know when this episode will come out, and I'm not sure if we're allowed to speak current affairs. But one of the things that has been trending as we film this episode in South Africa has been a lady who has a Nigerian father, and it's come out now, her mom is Mozambican, who was running for Miss South Africa, and it caused a huge storm. And it raised many, many layers of issues around xenophobia, Afrophobia. Who is a South African? Who is a Nigerian? Who is a Mozambican? And the beauty of sitting with you is I'd like to think you are a fully, how do I even describe it? You're a full African, so to speak. And you, more than me and many other people, actually have a more educated and informed and experienced thought and opinion on these issues that we have. The colonial borders, Pan-Africanism, should Africans freely move within each other, ideas around intra-trade. The world is changing, and is it such a bad thing to have a person born in Ghana being Miss Tanzania, and she's got Ghanaian parents who moved to Tanzania, and what does it mean? Is she wrong? Should she be more pro-Tanzania? Should we celebrate her heritage? The world is changing, and some of these nuanced conversations we're not having, and they are fundamentally important for the African continent as we, without realizing it, are fully engaged in a decolonization project. Because all of these arguments and disagreements and fights are us fighting against colonial systems that were forced onto us. And we don't like them, and we lash out in various ways. And I think you become one of the amazing people that needs to raise their voice. Your voice doesn't have to be right. It can be completely wrong. You can say, we hate Nigerians, they must go away and go live on an island somewhere. But you can be like, this is based on my travels around the continent. It's based on all the different people I've met. And maybe if we're not saying chase away South Africans, you're saying South Africans, you guys need to change your mindset. And the reason you're ignorant is because you haven't traveled. It's because you haven't done this. And we start having those very, very important conversations. And every person who watches this, listens to this, in their own little way becomes an ambassador of decolonization so that the continent can become better.
I think that brings to mind the whole idea of the African identity and who is an African.
Yeah. Yeah. That's deep.
I know you have been following the Olympics a lot.
Yeah.
And, obviously, guys, I see on his status. Anyways. Yeah, comes with a job. So I saw a comment. Someone, wrote a comment and they said that the beauty of Africa is that when an African wins in the Olympic, the whole continent comes together to celebrate that person, right? And I think that should make us think of who do we consider to be an African, and how do you qualify being an African? Is it that you're born in Africa, your parents are African, or you have lived in Africa, right? Or you have contributed to the continent, right? And so it's a really interesting conversation.
It's one of my favorite questions to ask pro-Black activists. I asked Dr. Umai Fatunde. Normally how I phrase the question is, can a white person be an African? Because that's more provocative and it forces you to engage better than what is an African, which sounds academic. I asked Joshua Maponga the same question. I've asked Umkhulu Ntsingeza the same question. I think I may have asked Abba Leo Amlak the same question. What is an African? And I'm not even going to try and attempt to answer it now. But I will say this. Human beings are very convenient, all of us. We love celebrating the good and we always isolate ourselves away from the bad. So if you come from a family that is very well off, you'll beat your chest. Oh, you come from that family, like, us Shombas, we own everything and what. And you're like, okay, cool. Then when you have criminal elements in your family, your uncle is a mass murderer or your aunt scammed people, you're like, hey, in the family, we don't really like her. And we're not even sure if we're related. A similar thing happens with Africans. It happens in South Africa where we have what we now call fake unity. The Springboks win the World Cup. We hug with white people. Oh, proudly South African. And then you get to the real issues like land and the economy. And then all of a sudden, the same white people, come on, get over it. And you're like, but these are the legacies of the past. Now we're not united anymore on the more real issues. But on the surface, we see a bunch of African gents winning a World Cup with France. And we're like, yeah, you see, Africans, Baba, African genetics. And we see Letsile Tibugo winning the 200 meters at the Olympics, and we identify with him. And we see certain people from Africa or of African descent representing other countries around the world. And that's one of the things that needs to be discussed, that we've got African athletes representing other countries because of corruption and bribery in the continent, where an athlete was asked to pay $2,000, where, I don't know this football player's name. Is it Mbappe? It might be Mbappe.
Kylian Mbappe? Yeah.
His father was asked to do some shady thing in some African country, and he was like, no, and they left and they went to France. And today he's a superstar. We need to discuss that. But outside of that, we celebrate the greatness of Africa when it serves us. But then when it comes to the real issues of tribal, cultural differences, colonial borders that we didn't choose, how we feel about each other, issues like colorism, which are big on the continent. You'll find certain people like other Africans because they're light-skinned. And then when dark-skinned Africans rock up in a place, all of a sudden people are like, who are you? This is not your home, etc., etc. So in uncovering what is an African, we just need to remember that many of us are convenient in being proudly African. And many of us are convenient at times to not be proudly African when you're in another place, where you're in America or you're in Europe, and they're like, yeah, but Africa is poor. And you're like, oh no, where I live, we're very well off. We've got you're like, so you're being convenient and you're not being in solidarity with the parts that you find embarrassing. So again, we may not be aware, but conversations like this are fully part of the decolonization project. And that's to say, before colonizers came here, forced their laws on here, forced private property ownership, forced their type of capitalism, forced their languages, English, French, etc. here. Who were we? Who are we supposed to be? And how do we fix the trauma of our disruption? And Sankofa, go back and take the things that worked and then bring them into the future, which will serve more than just black people, because decolonization is not for black people. And many people don't know that. Decolonization will help so many white people. Things like organic remedies. Things like getting in touch with spirituality and knowing how to connect with your ancestors. White people have ancestors too. I know some black people might be like, hey, these people are demonic. White people have ancestors too. White people benefit from eco-friendly spaces, which is what Africa was. White people benefit from being in nature. White people benefit from music and dance, which is part of who we are. White people benefit from our indigenous foods, which are very healthy. So decolonization is not just about everything white is bad or it's only for black people. Who are we supposed to be in the future? And then how do we correct the present where we can speak English without feeling like it's oppressing us to speak English? Where we can engage with white people and not feel like they are other. We can set a criteria of this is how we engage. And if you're willing to meet us here, you can be one of us. If you are not, then yes, you are a foreigner because it means you're serving a foreign agenda. Do you identify this as your home? Do you identify this as your food? Do you identify these people as your people? Or will you take all the money you've made here and your first point of call is to put it in an offshore account and enrich Germany and France and Spain, which means you're actually an agent. And again, this thing is not unique to whites. There are black Africans who are taking the money here and behaving exactly like colonialists, investing in Australia, investing in Canada, investing in Switzerland, and the bulk of their wealth is not being invested on the African continent, but because they are black, they're like, no, but I'm proudly African. You're like, no, I think you're actually part of the problem and we need to explain to you why and how we can try and fix this for the future. Because when the continent collapses, you and your children will run away to your new home as if it was your old home being Europe or America, and we'll be left here because you refuse to invest. And then we say the same thing to white people. If you love Africa and you claim this is your home, prove it, invest. Learn an indigenous language. And if you don't want to learn an indigenous language, it's okay. We must, those working in advertising, in corporate, come up with these catchy terms that force white people to be like, hey, I know Ubuntu, I know what, and without realizing it, they are part of the decolonization project where they go overseas and a white person is saying, we've got this saying in Africa, Ubuntu. And you're like, hey, okay. This guy's exporting our culture and our beliefs, and that becomes a beautiful thing. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on the current affairs with, her name is Chidima Vanessa Adechina. Born in Soweto, Pimville in South Africa, Nigerian father, it comes out Mozambican mom, who apparently stole an identity of someone. Very scandalous. She was running for Miss South Africa. She ended up being forced to withdraw, she said, because of the safety of her family, etc. But it's opened this whole can of worms of what does it mean to be South African? What does it mean to be African? Do we still actually believe in these borders? And we engage from there.
That's a very interesting conversation to have. It's very interesting. I mean, I think then the whole question that you ask, can a white person be African? So,
please answer before you're not going to forget your thought?
No.
Please finish your thoughts and then I'll go back.
Oh, no, it's fine. Let me answer that because my thought was a follow-up on what you're discussing. Can a white person be an African?
Indian person, Chinese person.
Okay, so literally, can any person become an African?
Yeah. What? Because once you answer that, then we'll have a criteria of what it means to be African. It's easier to say who is not. What is a woman? Matt Walsh asks from the Daily Wire, what is a woman? And you're like, oh no, someone with a penis who has a lot of it. Like, oh no, that's not a woman. Like, oh, okay, so that means you know what a woman is because you know what a woman is not. So can a white person, Indian person, Chinese person be an African?
Yeah. I think I'll have to go back to my ancestors. Kwame Nkrumah. He said, I'm not an African because I was born in Africa, but I'm an African because, he said, Africa is in my blood.
Something like that?
Something along those lines.
Let me try to find it. Please carry on.
Please. But I think the whole idea of, okay, let me think of Mazrui again, right? The classifications of an African. You're born in Africa, your parents are in Africa, you've lived in Africa, African of the soil, blood. I don't know the last one. But yeah, I think...
Sorry. The line goes, I'm not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me.
Right. Okay, great. Because Africa was
And then
born
you can interpret that how you want.
So I think if you claim to be an African, what is it that you do to prove that you're an African, right? Because I don't think you can say that you're an African and, you're not doing anything to make the continent better, right? And so you can have black people who are Africans, but they're literally not doing anything.
But they're
to
African.
help the continent be better, right? And then you have a white person whom people could claim they're not an African, but then they're doing what's good for the continent, right? And so should we also have classes of like, American, African, like the way it's in the US, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a really challenging question. It's a really challenging question. But I think if you can agree that a black person can become an American,
but they qualified as black or African American.
So that's why I was
so
thinking.
Hence
can we also have like
Chinese African,
Chinese African or American African?
Would you prefer that?
Would I prefer that?
At least for now.
Okay. Would they also want to be considered that way in terms of their ancestral lineage?
But it shouldn't matter because we'll decide for them. Because in other groups, in other places, people don't choose; they are told. Because you've got Indian South Africans who have been here for over 10 generations, and you still call them Indian, but they have no links to India except that their descendants are from.
Yeah.
So when we speak about ancestors and forefathers, which a lot of people reference, I then go further to qualify. Most people agree with the notion that life started in Africa. And if we're all going to agree that life started in Africa, then we then have to follow up and agree that everyone then comes from here. The Chinese, the Europeans, the Americans. Because if you're going to say, but their forefathers are not from here, up to which point? Where do we draw the line? Because we're saying life originated here. Right. They can be like, but we all come from here anyways. It's just we wandered somewhere else and we changed skin tone, hair, whatever, but we're coming back home. The same way we want African Americans to come back home. White people are also like, oh, we're also coming back home. I mean, if life started here. Otherwise, then we need to agree that we don't believe that life started here, at least not for everyone. Then we have to bring in the theory that maybe there were different life forms starting elsewhere, and there was the original man in whatever Europe was, in whatever China was, in whatever the Americas were. And only from this 1 year was there the first black man. And then from there, we are the descendants of those people. But everyone else comes from somewhere else. And currently, we don't agree on that, which is why when you ask, who is a South African? We have to ask from which point? Because some people say the original South African are the Khoi and the San. And the rest of the Ngunis and the Sutus, they come from the Ntu, which comes up north, depending on who you ask. But then other theories say, no, but life started at Adam's calendar. So life actually started here in South Africa. And you're like, cradle of humankind. We're not sure. And we need to ask. And once you have that, at least from a time, if you want to use time as a measure, because you used value add as a measure. But if you use time and someone says, no, my family's been here for 50 generations. You're like, but you're white. I'll have children with a white woman. They become mixed race. Those mixed race children have children with a white person. Those children become even lighter.
Right.
4 generations later, we've got white people who are like, but my great-great-great-grandfather was a black man. And it's like, well, you're white. Go back to Europe.
If we are to create categories of what it means to be an African, what categories would those be?
That's what you're meant to be answering. Are you switching back on me?
No, I mean, no, I want us to think together. Because I think you can say you are born in a land, right? So, you belong to that land.
Yeah, legally it's easy. The legal part is easy, but that we didn't decide that legal.
Right.
The legal is colonial systems. Born there, have an ID or birth certificate. Therefore, henceforth, thus, you are that.
Okay, this might be diluting it a lot, but what are the criteria that people use for you to be able to belong to a certain group?
For African, it's black. Must look, sound black. Must have a certain texture of hair, a certain texture of skin.
Which brings me to my next question. The idea of North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, how did that come about?
Oh, geez, I don't know the history, but I can imagine. You'd like to hear my imagination?
Go for it.
I'm going to go broader, if that's allowed.
Sure.
So, if we assume that life started in Africa, whether it started in the cradle of humankind and in Zalo Yelanga, Adam's calendar in South Africa, or some may argue up north, closer to your Ethiopias and the like. Either or, we are taught, this is just the story, whether true or not, that the world was one landmass. It wasn't what it is now, which is split. And over time, it's been breaking up and splitting to what we have today. So assuming we all started roughly in one place, we can assume that people then moved. Which, if we were to take this landmass and bring it back together in some way, you can start seeing the similarities with certain South American people, certain, let's say, Indianish people, closer to like Ethiopian Somalians, and then the Arabs, and it seems from the epicenter, assuming it's Ethiopia, where I think the oldest Bible is found, and if people move out and they move to colder regions, their body adapts to become lighter. It's almost like a dark-skinned person being indoors, they become lighter. If you're out in the sun, more melanin, more carbon. So they become lighter, and it also affects their hair texture, etc. So we'll assume that. Based on that theory, I think they call it the Negroids and the whatever it's called, these breakdowns of and the Mongoloids, depending on where you're from. If we were all black and had hard curly hair and were, I apologize to use this term, but let's say we were chimpanzees, and then you move away to climates where you start losing your hair and you change and you get lighter. You've got a chimpanzee and then you've got a lily white, pale, straight hair person. And then every other person is a mixture of those two, the chimp and this extremely white, I don't know if you'd call it a Neanderthal as an example. And then depending on where they're based, their geography, their diet, the equator, then you start seeing shades of. And then lifestyle. Why do some people have slanted eyes? Why are they taller? It's based on your survival. Were you guys climbing trees? Were you jumping up? Did you have to get under tunnels? And then over time, I think your genetics then morph in that way. That is my theory on, I've even forgotten your question, my theory on why we are so different and where we come from. But it's an imagination. Assuming that we all started in one place and then we changed. Because I also, when I look at my family, you can look at grandparents that are the same, and then you look at the children who start differentiating. Then you look at the grandchildren where now you bring in different blood. And if the grandchildren happen to also someone got with an Indian and a Chinese and a white person, the great-grandchildren all of a sudden are a mixed bag. And now you have to explain, how did it come about that? It's like, it's because my one cousin traveled to China and met a Chinese man. My one cousin traveled to India and met an Indian woman. My one whatever would stay in the house the whole day, so they became light-skinned. My one what worked in the mines. My one what was a long-distance athlete, so they'd always be in the sun. That's why their children are darker. And so I think it morphs based on even what we're seeing with our little experiments of who we are. I even forgot what your question was.
Yeah, the question was, the criteria is to belong in a group. But
Sure.
then using your theory, right now, assuming everyone, same place, and then people moved out to different areas. Now, let's assume people moved out, but they remained black, right?
Yeah.
But then they're in different parts of the world. Would the way we define an African who is also black in the continent change? And then now would move from your skin texture, your skin color, to something else?
No, we have that now, even without having to move far away. The classifications of human beings are wide and vast, and sometimes we only focused on the colonial European interruptions, what we call white supremacy, where the person that is lighter, has straighter hair, is prettier. But to be honest, we've always distinguished to a point where if there is no marked differentiation, we'd make them. Whether it's piercing ears and dragging them, or putting a plate in your lip, or whether it's cutting your face, to be like, since we look so similar, we must look different, just to differentiate and to categorize. So we've always had those. It's just we'd like to assume that it wasn't for nefarious and oppressive reasons, where because of the white supremacy project, it seems like when people come in, they do it to dominate and to wipe out who you were, but we've always done it. We still do it today, whether it's our tribes. The fact that we differentiate by tribes is not because of white people. We had different families, and it's based on your land, where you're based. It's based on your skill sets. Maybe you're a family of singers, or you're a family of amazing hunters. It would be based on where you guys have traveled, or the wisdom you have, or the spiritual gifts that you are given. And then you distinguish based on that. Even some of our so-called surnames today, our names, our clan names, would be derivatives of where we've traveled, who we've been, what we've done. And we differentiate from that. And we would have that. But it wouldn't be so much to oppress each other, but more to highlight the beauty of wherever it is that you come from. But today, with what we call economics 101 and the fake theory that there's scarcity in the world, we are now forced to fight for the so-called fake scarcity. And as we fight, you want to fight with the people that are your people. And that's where you start looking at, does he look like me, sound like me? Do they come from the same place as me? And then we start fighting where we shouldn't be, because there's abundance everywhere. And part of decolonization is to be like, we live in abundance. And money does not define abundance. Abundance is land. Abundance is food. Abundance is water. Abundance is imagination. And we've been trained and colonized and conditioned away from that, where you are big and strong and beautiful and you live on lush land with water, and you say, well, I don't have money, so I'm poor. And you're like, no, you need to decolonize your mind, because you are extremely wealthy, and we'll show you how.
That's why I'm also very interested in marketing, and advertisement, and propagandas too.
Yeah, that's all psychology. It speaks to exactly what you're saying, the human mind.
Yeah. I mean, because it's funny, because the way you think about it, there are people who would say, okay, for example, the measures of economic strength, right? People would say, this country lives under $2 per day, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm living in the farm.
Yes.
Right? I can get eggs from my chicken, milk from the cow.
I love this topic you're raising.
Right? And then I have a farm. I have vegetables over there. Just go grab bananas and then, you have mango. You literally have everything you need.
But
right?
you're poor.
But you're poor. According, you're considered poor. Right?
Correct.
And then we end up believing that we are actually poor.
Yes.
Right? While in reality, we eat healthy, right? We have a healthy lifestyle. We look good, feel
Spend
good.
Spend time in the sun, in nature.
Exactly.
We're with our family.
You're literally living.
Yeah.
But then you are, I wouldn't say advertised, but you're considered to be poor, right?
Correct.
And that your way of life isn't one that you should,
aspire to. You must move away from that.
Move away from that. And then, when you're sick, don't use herbs anymore, right? I came across the idea of, was it not Dale Carnegie. Rockefeller?
J.D. Rockefeller?
Yes. And his influence in the pharmaceutical industry.
Oh boy.
Right? And so it's just so fascinating. Like it's really interesting. And I think we are moving more towards that. Right? And because I think I saw in Kenya now they're not allowed to use how would you call them?
Indigenous herbs?
Seeds.
Oh.
Right? Now they're not allowed to use them.
Oh, that's been happening with Monsanto and some of these other companies that are monopolizing seeds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you go like, oh, cool. So
Coggle, I think, is another one.
Now you want us sick, and then we go to your hospitals, you sell us medicine that we become addicted to, and then we have to keep on using the medicine, and then we rely on that, right? Until we die. So
I was trying to find an article here, and I know I'm gonna struggle. It's in my notes. Struggle to find it because it's so important to me in this topic that you're raising. Sort of here it is. Do I want to read the whole thing?
I mean, go for it.
It's the concept of tangible and intangible wealth. I found this on the internet many years ago. I think I summarized it. So it compares, I don't know when the study was, and the amounts are not important that I'm reading. So you've got natural wealth in poor countries, produced wealth in poor countries, and intangible wealth in poor countries. So natural wealth will be your land, your minerals, your farm farmed goods, those things. That's natural. And then you'll have your produced wealth. So that's some level of processing, manufacturing, beneficiation of sorts. And then there's intangible wealth, where we're speaking, how much is Coca-Cola, the brand, worth? Right. How much is Apple worth? That's intangible. And then they did the same for rich nations. And I'm not going to give the amounts, but you'll see that the natural wealth in poor countries versus rich countries tends to be almost similar. The produced wealth in rich countries tends to then jump up. So you mine a raw diamond in Botswana, and then you send it to Antwerp. And then in Antwerp, it gets cut into a refined, so it's produced. And then there's the intangible wealth, which is now the biggest differentiator. And the diamonds move from Antwerp to Switzerland, where now it's marketed as, this is the diamond that Julius Caesar gave to Cleopatra. And because of that story, it went from being worth $10,000 to being worth $500 million because of that story. So I write in my notes, this shows that in poor countries, intangible wealth accounts for 55%, or let's say 50% of total wealth in poor countries. But it accounts for 80% in rich countries. So when you look at America, Switzerland, parts of Europe, and they tell you that this is a first world and it's a wealthy country, you'll find that how they define wealth has almost nothing to do with mineral resources. Almost nothing, or natural. And you're like, how can it be? And this is where now we go into the psychology of what you're speaking about. I write here, I don't know about you, but this tells me that rich countries lie about the perceived value of things, thereby inflating value and convincing the world that it's true. What this further tells me is that a big chunk of wealth that rich people possess, the individual now, is not real. And thus, even if you stole some of their stuff, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to convince others of its value, unless you're perceived as rich yourself. So, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, one of the saddest countries in the world, because it is in natural wealth, the wealthiest country in the world. But in terms of produced and intangible, it's nowhere, and it's got constant conflict. If the people there decided to take ownership, like the Arabs and oil in the Middle East, or like other people elsewhere, they would need to learn, if they don't have the ability, learn to convince the world that our minerals are still worth what you guys said they were. Because if they can't do that, they will still sell them for dirt cheap to someone else who tells us a story. Blood diamonds go to De Beers, and then De Beers tells this beautiful story. And the same diamond that a child got paid enough to go and buy cabbage and cooking oil and spices, that same diamond allows someone to buy a Ferrari and a mansion. It's the exact same diamond. So what changed? What changed becomes the story. And one of the tricks that the West has gotten right in scamming the rest of the world, and Africa in particular, is convincing us that certain things are worth nothing so that they get them for cheap. And then they convince the same people that these things are worth everything. And I, as a African in diaspora in Luxembourg, I am raised by privileged parents who traveled, studied there, and I learned fine art. And I go and find out my origin of where I come from, and I fuse the beauty of Africa, where I come from, and European, and I create an artwork. The artwork takes me 1 week to make. And I travel the whole world telling the story of, I cried for the first 3 days when I was making this artwork, because I was crying the tears of my ancestors, and how my ancestors were moved to America and they were slaves, and how my parents moved willingly. But it was a form of psychological slavery because they felt that a better life was elsewhere. And I was raised in Europe, and I went on the pilgrimage back to Africa to go and find my roots. And then I went back to Europe, this time hopefully decolonized, to come and make this artwork, and I cried the tears of my ancestors. And after crying, I closed my eyes and I picked up paint. And I picked up materials, and some of the materials are materials I found in Africa, and I made this work. And you go around telling the world, and everyone's like, this is the Mona Lisa of the modern era. And Bill Gates, Elon Musk, some of my exhibitions, I asked Kanye West to come and to speak about why he believes slavery was a choice as a form of decolonization. And I bring Chance the Rapper, and I bring Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, and I bring some of the African scholars, to come and speak. And they buy the artwork for $500 million. And I'm worth 500 million from that day. And I go to Africa, where I come from, and I buy vast amounts of land, and I have 200 workers that work for me, that are my servants. And I become Mansa Musa. I become super wealthy, and it's all from an artwork that took me a week to make, and a story that I sold. When the people that work for me pledge their lives to be my servants forever, to create things for me, to build businesses. But because I convinced someone that this one artwork is worth 500 million, I get to own your life. And the whole money story and the scam of the money story is convincing you to give me more of your life than what I will give you of my life. And the wealthiest business people create business structures that convince you that you cannot build wealth without working for me, so that I don't work at all. And for your labor and your sweat and your ingenuity, you will work 20 days in a month, and you will get paid 3 of those days. And the other 17 days will all be mine. And that's what makes me wealthy. And once people can understand that psychology, this natural produced intangible wealth, and they flip the script, we can monopolize African music. We can monopolize African creativity. We can put what we call IP. This is where the wealth lies, the IPs and the patents, where the Chinese will make the same Louis Vuitton and the same iPhone for $10, send it to America, and just like that, because we have the IP, it goes from $10 to $1,000 for the exact same thing that was made by Chinese slave labor. And you say no one outside of the African continent that has not been qualified is allowed to use African words, sing African songs in their movies, in their music, replicate Ndebele design like Dr. Esther Mahlangu. And we will go and, there's a nice word for this thing, but basically getting back the gold and the music, there's a word for it. And it will be ours. And anyone who wants to use it will pay top dollar. Because this is worth more than oil. This is worth more than gold. This is human life. We are the cradle of humankind. And if you want to say Aguna Matata, if you want to speak about Ubuntu, we have put a price on all of that. And it costs us 5 times your life. And if your life is you're a New York banker or you're a Wall Street lawyer, you will work for 2 years to be able to wear Ubuntu as a brand which captures the essence of life. Instead of the inverse, where Black Africans and other indigenous peoples will serve 20 years of their life for what is called a bond for a house that costs 1 month to build. A house that costs 1 month to build requires you to slave 20 years of your life for a bond, for interest, for the right of. And then beyond the 20 years, you will spend the rest of your life paying property taxes, which means it will never ever be yours. And if you fail to pay that, they take it back. And while you're working these 20 years, while you're working for the rest of your life, they come up with this thing called inflation, so that your labor becomes worth less every year. And natural resources, the cows and the land, becomes worth more. The things that they convinced you to let go of. Because what is land if I don't have money? You can have this land. Then the person takes that land, privatizes it, tells you a story, and that land is now intangible wealth worth, if you look at Las Vegas, if you look at Sun City, if you look at certain areas that have now become extremely valuable. Based on what? No, this is where the wealthy, it's a story. But a couple of generations before that, there were indigenous people living there, and they were convinced that this land is worthless because they don't own their minds, because of marketing, advertising, propaganda. And the people that master these things are the people that not only become incredibly wealthy, they are the people that get to convince other human beings of what is valuable and what's not. Because De Beers convinced the world that diamonds are forever. Diamonds are a girl's best friend when they were virtually worthless. And people picked them up like we pick up seashells and bring them home. We're like, hey, I found this nice rock. They monopolized that exact thing. And they said, only we will have the seashells. And if you want a seashell, it is $1,000. And if your man really loves you, he'll get you the biggest, most beautiful seashell for $20,000. And you'll know that that's love. But he must work for 5 years to buy you just that one seashell. And the people that run the world understand this. And this is where your Rockefellers, this is where your Carnegies, this is where all these guys invest not just money, but a lot of psychological investment in creating institutions that colonize the minds of others. Through the church, through the school, through social media, through movies and TV, through art, what you consider to be art. And in one way or another, it ensures that you believe that this is what the right thing is and what you were taught before is wrong. That's the story of 1984, which you referenced.
Right.
I thought this was wealth, but we've been told now we were wrong. This is actually now wealth, and that is now worthless. And now Bill Gates is buying up all the land in America, which is meant to be worthless. Because we let go of our land because it was worthless to go and live in a flat in New York. And then Bill Gates went to buy rural land that we're like, this is worthless. He's also like, it's worthless. I'm just buying it so someone owns it. You're lying. Because you convinced everyone to leave the villages to the cities so that you can buy up their villages at a steal, so that the day they need to move again, you'll be like, oh, no. You're actually going to have to pay top dollar because, this is virgin land. This is beautiful land. Look at it. You're like, but my ancestors own this. Oh, well, sorry for your ancestors. They didn't see the beauty of this thing. I do now. So, sorry for that rant. I just wanted to read that part and tell you my views.
Because if I think about it, intangible wealth, that's why you have the US, right?
Yeah.
Produce, China. And then Africans,
natural wealth.
We are at the very bottom.
You painted it very beautifully. Very beautifully. Natural wealth, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Produced wealth, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. Intangible wealth, New York, Los Angeles, Geneva, Switzerland.
When you read 1984, you feel like thinking is a privilege. Being able to think is a privilege. But then I think the fact that we have had that for so long, we never really got to think about it. We're like, I have brains, but I'm not going to use them. I'm going to wait for someone else to think for me. And it's really scary because we don't tell stories, right? And I think what is considered invaluable in terms of branding, most of the times, stories.
It's all it is.
Right? They're stories. And we don't tell stories. And so we lack on the top one, right? The invaluable wealth, we're out.
Yeah.
Produce. So there's this time I was thinking, in Tanzania, when you buy a second-hand car, let's say from Japan, a Toyota, if it's $10,000 to buy it from Japan, by the time it arrives in the port in Dar es Salaam, you pay tax, which is almost the equivalent of the price that you paid to purchase the car. And I'm thinking, where on earth will the inspiration for manufacturing such stuff come from? Because you're literally earning more than the people who are manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so, you can just as well just sit down and collect all the money, right? And so we end up depending on the natural resources.
Yeah.
And, the cycle goes on.
Correct.
Yeah. And before we started recording, I asked you the question of money and wealth, because I think it's a question that we need to discuss a lot about, because we hardly do that. And we hardly discuss about money. How should you use money? How should you spend it? How should you save it? How should you invest in it? How should you teach your kids about it?
Yeah.
Right? And I think as an entrepreneur, I think that's also one of the things that you can talk about, right? And I think you ranted a lot about wealth, right? So I think we have started going down that road. But yeah, I think the question of money and how we perceive it, because I think a lot of it has to do with our perception about it, right? The way we think about money. And so, yeah, man, what do you think about money?
Are you aware, you referenced the book, The Psychology of Money. I'm going to get the author's name. Are you aware of your relationship with money?
No. not gonna lie, I think I am trying to figure it out right now. Because I never thought about it. It's you work hard for it, earn it, spend it. You go back to working hard for it.
Sure.
And so right now is the time that I want to start thinking about money and being strategic about it, right? And so hence the conversations, because that's one of the ways to learn about it.
The Psychology of Money: Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed, and Happiness by Morgan Housel or Husel. Something along those lines. There's a great guy, Mark Manson, who wrote The Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
And while we're chatting at some point, I'm going to try and find a piece that I quoted from him about money, which I think is really dope. Neil Ferguson wrote an amazing book. And if you're not a reader, I think you can still find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
The Ascent of Money, ASCENT, The Ascent of Money, where he gives a history of where money comes from, where money is, and where it's supposedly going. And I think that's very important. In starting the journey. I sat on Podcast and Chill 2 years ago, I think, with Mac G and Sol. And I spoke about the reason Black people have got a very horrible relationship with money is because of the way money was introduced to Black people. It was traumatic. Black people, at least in the South African context and other parts of Africa, it was not something that we openly, it's like colonial borders. We didn't openly say we like money, let's do this money thing. A brief history that can be told, one of the stories is rural Africans, South Africans were living in what we call rural Africa. They had land, an abundance. They had an abundance of livestock and produce, fruits, vegetables. And the British colonizers came through and they created, number one, they created the Union of South Africa. They created borders. They created laws. And then they created a money system along with the laws. And they started enforcing a tax, which I believe was called a hut tax. If you own a hut, you must pay a tax. But this tax was payable in money, not in chickens, not in goats, not in cows, which people had in abundance, in money. And it was like, we don't have money. Well, you need to get money. Where can we get money? And at the time, I guess they hadn't sophisticated their systems to barter their livestock to pay the tax. Because that may have been easier. But also if you're getting taxed every month, but it takes however long to give birth to a calf, you're now working backwards. So then the people would have to move to the cities, to the mines, to the factories, to the commercial farms to earn money so they can pay the tax. And the money they were earning on top of paying the tax was minimal. It was below survival. And because of that, people were then pushed into debt, which now became the new form of slavery, where I don't need to chain you, I don't need to whip you, I just need you to know that you owe me money, so you will enslave yourself and do whatever it takes to make that extra money. So Black people have got a negative relationship. They don't have enough money, tax strangles them, debt strangles them, and then there's inflation. And when you think of money for the average person, it's a wish. One day I hope to be rich. But the current, even when people earn a salary, they've got anxiety because their debit orders start running off. They've got anxiety because they owe someone money. They owe the school money. School fees are strangling them. And the psychology of money and some of the work that needs to be done is fixing this trauma. And part of fixing the trauma, to what I was saying, is starting with learning the history of money. What is money in essence? And the what is money was meant to be a middleman between arguably two people who are exchanging goods and services.
Right.
That's all. Where it got messed up is here in the middle, where it no longer quantified the exchange of goods and services, and it quantified so much more. This is where we speak about the intangible values and the whatever. If I'm giving you a cow, you're giving me 3 goats. If I'm giving you 3 goats, you're giving me 10 chickens. If I'm giving you 10 chickens, you're giving me 20 heads of cabbage. Something that makes sense.
Yeah.
Today, what money represents is the psychology of what I think perceived value and no longer real value. Where I made the example of I spent a week making an artwork, but the money I got was exchanged for 200 employees that are going to serve me for the rest of their lives. That is not fair in what this was meant to be. For my week of making an artwork, I was meant to get a week of labor from one person. That could be they planted spinach and now they give me the spinach. Hey, for that artwork, I'll give you some spinach. And you're like, are you crazy? This artwork is worth your GDP. No, that artwork is worth my spinach. And once you understand that as the individual, the way you engage money becomes different, because when someone gives you money, you say, no, I don't want this. I want the good or the service. No, but this Ferrari, you're like, how long did it take you to make that Ferrari? With the craftsmanship and the what, it took us a year. Yeah, my calf also took a year to grow. I give you one cow, you give me one Ferrari. And you're like, no, okay, I give you 3 cows for the Ferrari. No, you're mad. Those cows are 60,000 rand. This Ferrari is 5 million. You're like, no deal. Because you now understand the value that, do I even need your Ferrari, to be honest? Because maybe the way where I live, it's not the right car. I will give a person 20 cows for a bakkie, for a van, for a truck. I'll give you 2 goats for this Ferrari. It's not functional. Yeah, it's pretty, maybe. But also, I don't think this is pretty. But this thing, I know I can load animals. I know it works on the terrain. I'll give 20 cows for this, because you're now moving beyond this value thing that someone convinced you and you go to. One of the points I didn't touch on when you made this example of the countries where we're like, they live in poverty, they live on less than $1 a day, is where, because we now focus so much on the money versus the real wealth, we don't understand that bartering has a value. And I've raised this on a platform before, that we speak very much about the average Asian community, money circulates 20 times or 6 times before it leaves. The average Jewish community, money circulates 20 times or however many times before it leaves. The average black community, money stays for like 6 hours and then it's gone. That is money.
What does the circulation mean?
Circulation means when a dollar, I'll use a dollar, can use a rand in South Africa. When a dollar enters a Jewish community, someone comes and buys from the grocer will take that money, and where their child goes to school, it's owned by a Jewish person. So they pay that money, that dollar goes to the Jewish-owned school. That Jewish school owner needs to use the doctor, and they take that dollar and they pay the doctor. And that doctor needs to maybe pay a farmer for something, because those people own those means of production. And in the black community, that dollar that comes in to the black grocery shop owner, when he needs to send their child to school, the school is owned by a white person, a Jewish person, a Chinese person. When they need a doctor, it is not a black person. So the money leaves. That's quantifying money. But what we don't do in black communities or poorer communities is we don't quantify value. Because we may not be circulating money, but we are circulating value. There's someone that is babysitting my child, but I'm not paying them money. I give them the spinach that I just harvested. The doctor, who is normally a traditional doctor, who uses traditional herbs, who didn't have to go and buy medicine from a pharmacy, and they don't need that. They grew the stuff, or they went to go and dig it in a mountain somewhere. No one quantifies that's value. I've now been healed, and I pay them in eggs or my chickens. No one quantifies that. And if we were to do that, you'd see how much more value people have. And we'd see how much more value some of these nations have, where we'll give you our gold for whatever money you want, it's okay. But we want something else for, let's say, our land or whatever. We will come sing for you. Oh, okay, give us the gold for cheap? Sure, we'll come sing, but we don't want money. We'd like iPhones. No, but those are, you say in China, cost $10? We'll sing for $10, but we don't want the money. We want the iPhone before it goes to America, or the equivalent. Now we're speaking value. It changes the whole proposition. The whole proposition. And that speaks to the psychology of money, the history of money, and what money is meant to be. I think Elon Musk tweeted this, and I know it's not his original quote, but something to do with money was only meant to be, I think it's money. Money was only meant to be an account of the value of goods and services in an economy. That's all it was meant to be. Because if you take 2 people, put them on an island each, You give the one $2 billion. You give the other one, what you speak about, seeds. You give them chickens. You give them time. Who's going to die? The person with the money. Because money means nothing. It is meant to be the quantification of goods and services. When you go a step further in the psychology of money, this is where now I read Mark Manson, if you'll allow me.
Yeah, sure.
So Mark Manson has a blog online. I think it's markmanson.com or .net or something. People can go look it up. He wrote the Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And in 2017, he releases this blog, October 5th, 2017. The Real Value of Money. Oh, do I want to read the whole thing? No, it's too long.
It's too long. Okay, just
it's too long. I want to find where I think it's important. It's not about the stuff. The stuff is merely there to shuttle you into some form of experience. Everything you spend money on is simply an experience. This is where I normally quote from. Because money is an exchange of experiences, money often results in experience cycles. We give up one negative experience to earn money, which is normally what we call work, and then purchase the opposite, a positive experience. Once the money runs out, we're forced back to the negative experience, the work, and the cycle starts again. Then he speaks about 3 cycles, because he speaks about these cycles. The first one is a stress cycle. Some people earn money through a great deal of stress. They work a high-pressure job or in a role where they are constantly criticized or threatened in some way. They then spend their money primarily in stress relief to compensate for the rigor their job creates. These people end up in a constant cycle of stress generation and stress relief while failing to actually build much wealth. Then there are ego cycles. Some people work in environments where they feel powerless, insignificant, and useless. These people then take out their insecurity by spending their money on superficial status symbols. They earn their money through insecurity and then spend their money on quelling their insecurities, thus never actually building wealth. So the security guard, the domestic worker, makes their money and then go buy branded clothing. Why? Because they feel belittled where they work. And to compensate for that, they now have to buy this expensive to show off. And they don't build wealth because of that ego. Then the last one is pain cycle. Other people actually hurt themselves to make a living. It may be physical pain, professional wrestling, swallowing swords, or it may be emotional or psychological pain, sex work, demeaning jobs, abusive bosses or co-workers. These people then spend their money on pain relief, alcohol, drugs, and other diversions, antidepressants, going for therapy, etc. So you don't build wealth. He then concludes by saying this: true wealth occurs when the way we spend our money is not simply compensating on how we earn it. Wealth occurs when the way we earn our money and the way we spend our money are aligned with one another. When our money is earned through a positive experience and spent on other positive experiences. People who fall into these experience cycles with their money soon become slaves to earning a buck. They begin to see money as the singular purpose of their life. It becomes the whole of their motivation. Once this happens, you no longer own your money owns you. It is not the currency. You become the currency. And the money will spend you as long as it can until either you stop it or you die. That's how you become now a slave. And again, going back to the history, going back to the psychology, what is money? What is it meant to be? A middleman for this exchange. And once you move past money to value, you start going back to what is it that I value? What is it that the world values? Because singing and dancing for me, I do for fun. I didn't know that I could get paid for this and earn enough money to buy a Ferrari. Black coffee now is wealthy. Because I didn't know that Chris Brown, who has Lamborghinis, from singing and dancing, bro, I will do this for free all day, every day. But someone said this is a quantifiable value and I've found a way to maximize it. How do I exchange, and to what Mark Manson is saying, how do I, in what I'm doing, growing food? I hate working in the garden. I love working in the garden. It's therapeutic. So I will do that and exchange that for another positive experience. And you do the same for many other things. Yes, there are jobs that most people kind of hate, cleaning a toilet. But there might be someone who's like, Bro, I've been cleaning toilets since I was a kid. My dad would make me clean toilets, so I don't see the demeaning aspect of it. So I don't need to spend my money trying to boost my ego because I clean toilets. I pride myself in it. I'm like, after you take a shit and you come back, the toilet's clean, you're welcome. And you're like, you're proud of that. You're like, I am. I find it to be amazing work for me. I went to visit the town of Oranje in the Northern Cape. It's been in the media, polarizing town. People call it a whites-only town. It's actually an Afrikaner-only town. Generally has white people. One of the core foundations of that town is white Afrikaans people saying they will fix the mistakes of the past. And one of the mistakes is exploiting black labor to build the wealth that white people have built in this country. So they believe in self-labor. They believe in working themselves, rolling up their sleeves. And the one pastor said to me, he had an epiphany, a light bulb moment when they moved to Oranje, he saw his wife cleaning the toilets and he felt bad, like, shit. No, you don't have to do that. It's like I was comfortable getting black people to clean up after me, to wash my underwear. Now that it's my wife, I feel bad. And I'm starting to see what demeaning labor is. And after realizing that, then I had to transcend it and be like, no, but someone has to clean the toilet. Someone has to wash the underwear. And it's us. And in doing it, it's a noble thing. We are cleaning our bathroom. We are cleaning our undergarments. And that's how they've been working on. Guys, there's no such thing as demeaning work. Being a bricklayer, which they build their own houses, they're white people building their own houses, sweeping the streets, cleaning the toilets. They do it. And they're like, if they hear now a black person speak about demeaning labor, they're like, we understand. It's because white people made you do those things. But because we do this labor ourselves, we realize, guys, someone has to do it. And you'd like that someone to be you. And to do it for the good of your family and your people. But the psychology of money speaks to the number one slavery tool today. More powerful than religion. More people are leaving religion or jumping into better, what they deem better, more peaceful religious groups. Whether you're Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Rastafarian, whatever it is you want to call yourself, atheist, I don't believe in a God, agnostic, whatever the case may be. Almost all of us are imprisoned by money because we cannot move without it. I don't believe in money. You go and get on a plane, get to the border and see if you can cross over without spending money to get a passport, without spending money to get a visa, without spending money to get a flight ticket. So we are all imprisoned and slaves of money, but we need to, again, decolonize money, where we say, what do we have, at least as Africans, that the rest of the world is willing to give us money or whatever is they value easily? Music, dance, our stories, our natural resources, which is why we speak about nationalization and political leaders that are corrupt and that are in collusion with the oppressive West or maybe even the East. It's we have these natural resources and we will fight to reclaim them because the world values oil, gold, copper, coal. We will own it. And then we will decide the value. And when they come and they say, we'll give you this many euros. No. Your euros are not good here. No, we'll give you dollars. No, your dollars are not good here. What do you want? And then we point. We want that. We will give you this gold in the DRC. We'd like you to give us Spain. Huh? No. We want you to give us that nation there. We'll give you the DRC and its wealth. We want Spain. Because maybe we figured out something about Spain. Or we figured out something about Israel. Or we figured out something about Switzerland or England. Or something in there. Back in the day, we trade, and this is going to be controversial, we trade in human beings. Now, not in the human trafficking sense that we have today, because we could argue that sports stars are a human trade of sorts. You get traded from one club to another club for better money, for better life. We would trade human beings where you will give me 20 heads of cattle. And because I think you're an honorable man and a good man, and I've met your family, you can have my daughter. And we build a strong bond. It's not meant to be human trafficking in that sense, but it's a form of trade. And you're like, I gave this guy my best cattle, and he gave me one of his most beautiful and prized daughters. And now we've built this bond as families where the grandchildren now belong to both families. So we could do that. We could be like, you can have gold. We would like some of your women in Sweden. We would like to have some of your women in China. And one of the things I have said to white people in this country is my measure of non-racialism from a white person, prove to me you're not racist by letting me have children with your daughters. Because I know for a fact that those are their most prized possessions. Not land, not wealth, not resources. A white man will give you all the gold and the land and the diamonds. He'll give you whatever you want. He will never give you his daughter. And you're like, if you really claim that we are equal and we are both human, because you want your white daughter to be with any other white guy, show me that you see me as the equal and let me be with your daughter. Not in a bad way again, like, if she likes me or at least the psychology, just the, if you or any of your kids would like to be with any of my kids, I'd be so happy. I'd be honored. Then I'm like, I think you truly are my brother and I see you. And maybe that could even answer the criteria of an African. If you are comfortable with yourself and your children, procreating, having children with the dark-skinned African, black African people who have forefathers here, and you see that not only as obviously, of course, but also as an honor, then you are an African. But if it's just because you own a piece of land or you are born here, but you refuse to dilute your European blood, it means you are still European. You are still Chinese. But once your Indian daughter is comfortably got children with a black African man, once your white son, you guys come from Spain, is having children with a black girl, then I believe we are now one. And we can start having those conversations and we're like, your money is not good here. We want a piece of your life. And when you can give us a piece of your life, we will give you a piece of our life, which is what you're asking for. Sorry, I've said a lot, man. Let me keep quiet.
No, that's a lot to unpack. No, and so when you were speaking, this is what I was thinking. A lot of what you said, was around the idea of perceived value, right? And I'm thinking, if a lot of people believe in the idea of perceived value, does it become a reality? Or does it become just a perceived value that a lot of people believe in?
We spoke about natural wealth, we spoke about produced wealth, and we spoke about intangible wealth. Yuval Noah Harari, the author of Sapiens and I think Origin, speaks about a fictional reality and an objective reality, which is what you're asking, perception versus reality. Reality is almost unavoidable. I think it's the one thing that many of us cannot fight. If I punch you in the face, you can be like, I do not perceive you to punch my face. I'm Neo in the Matrix, therefore I feel nothing.
But your face is disfigured.
And you're bleeding and you're swollen. So I'm like, hey, you can meditate and be a guru and be like, I live in the spiritual realm, but you'll be bleeding. As far as we know today, the arguments are this is not real and we are in the Matrix. Fictional reality can create what we understand to be objective reality, where someone is giving of their real life to earn money, which is fictional, because money means nothing. And as the world evolves and technology becomes more powerful, perception becomes more important than objective. Because perception has more of an influence than objective. The idea of earning a good salary will move you far away from your family, your real people, far away from your land to go to a foreign land and to serve foreign people that may not even like you because of the perception that you will live a better life versus the reality of that's your family, that's your land. It should be a no-brainer that it will never get better than that. It doesn't matter if you own mansions and own the Chrysler building. It'll never get better than those people there. I know there's a lot of amazing quotes in 1984, but there's the one about he who controls
the past.
Something along those lines. I'll get it.
I can get it for you.
Sure. You know, because I understand this psychology and the propaganda and the story, the whole point of, or part of my podcasting, the whole point of me building my own religion, the whole thing of me going around telling people I want to colonize minds, it's because I understand fundamentally that the person who, I don't know if you'd like to read it first.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay. So who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past.
Yeah. And to explain that very easily, sorry, please read the first line.
Who controls the past controls the future.
So people perceive this however they want. It's mostly like in a political space. If you control the past, you ran South Africa as the British. So you will control the future. You will dictate that they'll speak English, whatever the case may be. And then the second line is he who controls the present controls the past. So now this becomes now philosophical, and this is where perception comes in, because we'd like to think the past is an objective reality, right? It's like, come on, everyone knows history. Everyone knows life started in Africa. He who controls the present controls the past. What do you mean? It means the person in control now can dictate a version, a perception of the past.
Or what happened?
Everyone knows Nelson Mandela was a sellout. Everyone knows. He colluded with white people. He sold black people. That's why black people are poor today. The guy worked in the trenches. He infiltrated black liberation movements. And then they pretended that he was in prison. And then he came out. Go on Google. It says there, was Nelson Mandela a sellout? Obviously, everyone knows. History affirms. Oh, geez, I didn't know. You go 20 years ago, everyone knows that Nelson Mandela was a liberator of black people. He was the modern Moses. He rescued the Israelites from the Egyptians. He took black people from apartheid and he brought them into a post-democratic South Africa of freedom and abundance. He sacrificed. He was crucified like Jesus Christ. He sacrificed 27 years in prison, lost his family, came out an old man, and again embodying Jesus Christ, said, I will turn the other cheek. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. I forgive white people. Everyone go on Google. Was Nelson Mandela a sellout? No, Nelson Mandela was a liberator. So the person who controls the present is the person that controls the media, who controls the books, who controls social media, etc. today.
It's like the version of 1984 where they
Correct.
would go and write their new history and then discard the previous history. And so people read what has been modified, rectified.
It's called the Mandela effect. These examples that they use of, there's a clothing store in South Africa called Markham. I don't know if you know it.
No.
Markham, Markham. If people go online now and they look it up, it's Markham. And if you ask some people, they're like, no, it's Markham's. Everyone knows it's Markham's. Like, no, it's Markham. You can check now. No, it's Markham's. Another example is the Monopoly Man on the board game Monopoly. There are people that will argue that he wears a monocle. Like, no, he doesn't. You can go online now. There's no monocle. No, he does. I know for a fact. Like, no, he doesn't. So there's those tricks, because it's argued whether Mandela was actually passed away in prison and another Mandela was brought out. The Mandela effect. In 1984, that's the whole story of Robert Mugabe was a liberator. No, Robert Mugabe was a tyrant. No, Robert Mugabe was... It depends on who's telling the story. And for me, I almost don't care who's telling the story. What I care about is which version of the story best serves me. Am I best served with Mugabe the tyrant or Mugabe the liberator? Am I best served by Nelson Mandela the sellout or Nelson Mandela the liberator? And I will take the story that serves me. Because propaganda is propaganda. So, perception versus reality. He who controls the present controls the past. And we can nail it down even more to say, he who owns your mind owns your reality, whether past, present, and future. And you would like the person that you give your mind to be the person that can give you the best deal. Do I want to go and work for an Indian business owner, a black business owner, a white business owner, etc.? And for most black people today, they would rather work for the white business owner because the idea is that the white business owner will pay you better. They tend to have more resources because of history. Their systems are more organized. Black people are not as well trained in the organization of business and, scalability and networks. More fair, where you feel like maybe the Indian employer will exploit you, the black employer will lie and scam you and, focus on making themselves rich at your expense. So you'll go for the white one. Just as an example, by the way, I'm not saying these are facts, just as a hypothetical. So you almost want to do the same exercise. Who am I giving my mind to? Which political party am I voting for? Do I vote for the political party that fights for black people? Because I'm black. Yes. But I'm saying, okay, that's perception. I'm asking you. You live in suburbia. Your kids go to a private school. Which political party best serves you? Okay, maybe not the black one, because the black one will increase my tax. The black one will want to nationalize the land, which means the little bit of land I've worked hard to acquire will be taken from me. So maybe let me actually go for this white or this pro-liberal party because they will defend. They will want less taxes for me. They will make sure that inflation is brought down so I live better. Will it be at the expense of maybe poor black people? Maybe, but the reality is I'll be better off. So perception has become reality, but we need to, in choosing perceptions, try to always stick to or understand what real reality is and try to not deviate too far from it. Because I do believe fundamentally that we're animals. And I believe when everything else has failed, when the Zim dollar is hit by hyperinflation, when certain countries are sanctioned and your money becomes worthless, politicians become unimportant, and you need to go back to, I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, my children feel unsafe. And that's where you're like, I need weapons. I need to gain access to food. I need to be next to flowing water that I can drink that's clean. And that becomes real wealth that people like Bill Gates understand. People like the white people in South Africa, Afrikaans English understand, where they will make sure that they have a dam. Over 90% of our dams in South Africa are privately owned and majority by white people. And dams are where we get our water from. They understand the importance of having dams. That's objective reality. They understand the importance of having land, that it doesn't matter whether I'm rich or not, I have land. They understand the importance of seeds, organic seeds that are mine, that are not controlled by Monsanto and Cargill and everyone else. They understand the importance of building a strong body, because if I don't have a gun, if it jams, I can still defend myself physically. The importance of shelter, knowing how to hunt, knowing how to fish, my children knowing how to communicate, even if it's not in spoken language, but in sign language, that if worst case scenario, I'll hug you, I'll smile, and you'll know that we're good. And I always keep those core things because that's where I'm an animal. And that's where no one can ever threaten me with, you'll get fired from your job, you'll lose your money, you'll lose your house. You're like, I'm not scared of all of that because I can go live like a chimp in the wild because I've got the skills to survive in nature. And that means everything else becomes a game. Whether I'm with 1 million or 1 billion or 10 rand, I'm fine.
Isn't it scary, the fact that, things that were otherwise, natural to people, like, I don't know, fishing, right? Farming, hunting. Now they're almost a lost art.
They're not even meant to be an art. They're a survival requirement.
Yeah. But then right now, it's tough, Like, if someone can't buy their food in the supermarket, then there's no way of them getting food.
What is your definition of education?
Okay, so I'm trying to see how I can weave in, right? Because the first one is the idea that you can learn on your own. Nobody needs to teach you. The fact that you know how to learn on your own, because learning never ends, right? You constantly learn new stuff. And if your only way of learning is through sitting in a class and then having someone teaching you, the moment you graduate, are you still going to learn, right? And I think the second part of it is, what's the impact of education? Does it help you grow? Does it help you think better, communicate better, right? Does it help you have access to opportunities? When you get the opportunities, are you able to seize them, right? And so I think for me, it goes beyond certificates, beyond approvals. I think because you can question, if someone didn't go to school, but they read books, they're well informed, they're critical thinkers, they can analyze situation, right? They can use data, they can think for themselves, right? Are they educated, right?
It's a good
and
question.
I think they are.
Sure.
I think they absolutely are, because you can have someone who is self-educated and someone who has, a degree from a university, but then when you put them in a room together, they're on different levels, right? They're not at par at all. Right? And so obviously it depends, right? Tables can change. But I think for me, education just needs to liberate your thinking. If I tell you, oh, you know what? Throw your indigenous seeds, because that's what the data says.
Yes.
I'm just going to say, oh, cool, throw them out, right? And not think, why am I throwing them out right now? This is what has been used all this while. Now we're seeing most people buying the canned foods, and they're unhealthy, obese, dying of heart attacks. And my ancestors were using indigenous seeds. They are healthy, lived longer, right? And so if you can't think for yourself, I don't think you have been educated. I don't think you have received education.
So from what you're saying, education must be self-driven, or can be self-driven, must be the access of some type of information or knowledge from any source, doesn't necessarily have to be a classroom, must involve some level of critical thinking and problem solving, and then must make an impact.
It should. Just to alter on having access to information, I think it's what you do with that information, right? Because, back in the ages, having access to information was the real deal.
Sure.
Right now, you have more access to
than ever before
on your phone than the king in the 1960s. I don't know, who knows, 1880s, right?
100%.
Right? And so what can you do with the information that you have?
Yeah.
Right? You're told, I don't know, you should eat foods that have seeds because they're healthy for you, right? Oh, and then there's another thing that says, oh, cool, don't eat foods that have seeds, I think we see a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool, you have this information. Can you sit down, analyze both of them, think critically yourself, if need be, find other sources, and then come up with your own decision? Because I think at the end of the day, okay, this is something that my mentor told me, and I think it's something that I appreciate the most to date.
Sure.
He goes like, we can sit down for hours, but all I can do is just tell you what I think. At the end of the day, you are the one to make the decision.
Yeah.
And I think, the question is, can you make that decision as an educated person? Like, can I give you all the information and then let you make the decision yourself? Or would you want me to give you the information and then give you the decision? So I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but I think at the end of the day is, can you stand in front of people and say, I disagree with you?
Process of learning, self-study, being critical thinkers, solving their own problems, making an impact, applying what they learn? Or do you think it should be for specific groups?
When you're educated, then I think in a way you have an upper hand.
No, of course you do. But you have an upper hand to someone who's not.
Exactly.
And my question is, should everyone have an upper hand? And what does that even mean?
Yeah, I think everyone should have an upper hand, right? And yeah, it's like I'm thinking it's like, should you be educated or not?
If you were a leader of community or a province or a country, would you want to force everyone to be educated? Or would you want to give them the freedom to choose whether they want it or not?
I think part of, if you are also educated as a leader, part of it is also being able to give people choices, but then also realizing, to what extent can you tolerate that? Because if you think, so if for example, your people are poor, have worse living conditions simply because they're not educated compared to other people. I mean, obviously, even if they hate you, that is what you want to do, right? Because, at the end of the day, it's going to benefit them, right? Even if they don't see it now. Yeah. Even if they don't see it now, down along the lines, even if you're gone and they don't like you, they don't like what you did, but it benefited them, I think it's worth it.
If you were to know that educating those people forced would make some of them rise up, topple you, and then create a system that makes education exclusive, would you tweak your laws so that those people don't get as educated as they could be to access the ability to topple you because you believe you are better than them, more noble, more benevolent?
I think if you believe that, then you're also screwed.
But so you tweak, yes or no?
No, I'm saying if you believe that you're on top of everyone.
Well, let's say there's proof of concept. You generated you educated a generation. Some of them rose up. They tried to assassinate you. They were pushing an agenda of saying not everyone should go to school. We hate this guy. Why must kids be forced to go to school? They want to chill at home and watch social media, and they get a big following. And then you're like, no, this is dangerous. And you're like, I'm going to tweak so that some of these guys don't access some of the things, whether it's education, knowledge, to allow them to challenge me. I want everyone to be educated. Would you tweak?
Isn't this like the idea of saying, there are certain things you hide from those you love because you're trying to protect them?
You believe in that?
I think I do, yeah.
Do you understand the psychology of some of the people that influence the world choosing to ensure that certain groups don't get a certain type of education and certain type of access and certain type of seeds? Because when you speak to them, they explain the dangers of that freedom and that choice. Do you understand that? And if that was to be their argument, would you endorse it?
That's a really tricky question. And I think now we're trying to speak about, does freedom have limitations? Does it have limitations? I think it does. I think freedom does have limitations, because unless otherwise, it's just going to be chaos.
Outside of everything I've asked you, I'm going to go back to the question you asked me, because I hijacked your question. Your question was around we as people being moved away from indigenous knowledge that we use to survive,
right,
to a point where we're learning things that are kind of useless. And as someone who's a teacher yourself, having worked with the African Leadership Academy and other institutions, you have seen what institutions are about and what they educate and what they teach. And we have access to information via phones, the internet, etc. And then the thought of, number one, schools not having the type of content that actually empowers. Number two, knowing that there are other places that people can access information if they know. Number three, understanding that the people that create the institutions and give access to information have got agendas, and that they may believe their agendas are noble, whether it is for the people getting the education or for their people, whoever they may be, to keep them away from being overthrown. If we educate the Africans, if we give them access, America will become poor tomorrow. If we educate and for global peace and global harmony so that there aren't wars and people die, keep their education like this, keep their access like this. Let those of them who are willing to fight become rich and keep the rest oppressed. And you're like, we've tried uplifting these people and it's had bad results, because some of the most influential world leaders on a negative spectrum. I don't know about Adolf Hitler, but we'll add Robert Mugabe, maybe Putin, we'll add Xi Jinping. Some of these guys are highly educated, incredibly intelligent. And they got to a point of power and they made decisions that they felt in their heart was the right decision for their people. But a lot of carnage ensued. And the people that are running the world today via the UN are like, no, we want to make sure that those things don't happen again. And part of it is ensuring people don't have access, or we monopolize seeds so we can control food. For food security, we're doing it as a good. We'll ensure that we control pharmaceuticals because of malaria and whatever the case may be, so that people can have access. The side effects, we'll deal with that later, but we're doing the right thing here. And when you look at it, it's like, I don't think we have the freedom and the education, but the people that run it do. And I wanted you to almost go on this journey of understanding why why we are being kept from the skills that we have. Because if you empower at least Africans to do for self, it completely collapses the money system. And some of the things that you believe are benefits, maybe flying on planes, traveling to other countries, may disappear. I want to go to America. They might not be in America because you guys have destroyed that amazing things like cities. The whole hype around cities is that the townships and the villages, the rural areas are not great. But if you empower those people, they don't need to go to the cities for what? The cities go away. All the beautiful tourism, all the architecture, all the innovations go away because we don't need them. We were living in harmony in Africa. We were living with nature. We don't need a car. For what? I'm here with my family. I don't need money. I don't need to be rich. Because you're telling me if I go to school and I work really, really hard and I get a qualification and I get a good job and I commit myself, apply myself at that job and I get a good pension, then at the age of 65, I will then retire to a farm, waking up in the morning, listening to chickens, herding I'm like, I've got it now. So I don't want to go on this journey. I've already got it. I'm already on a farm. I'm already living with my animals. And it kind of kills the system that currently exists. And that's why some of these people make those decisions. To keep people from improving their lives and empowering themselves. Our politicians, most of them understand, no, some of them, most of them are idiots. Some of our political leaders, especially on the continent, understand that if you empower your people, you disempower yourself because they will not need you anymore.
And I think the question as a leader is that a sacrifice you are willing to take?
And most are not. And the few that are get branded by the global forces as bad people.
Because this is what I was thinking, right? I'm like, let's say, okay, Libya, for example, right? Before and after Gaddafi. So would you rather have, and okay, this ties to a bigger question, but I'll start from there. So would you rather have Gaddafi rule for 20 years, but your life is stable, it's good, everything is nice? Or go for democracy, after 5 years he leaves, you don't know what's behind the door, what is behind the door, but you're willing to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Right? And then this also now ties to the question of, and I think I asked this question to Joshua Maponga, is democracy a system that works for Africa?
I think the best form of leadership, because there's different types, is what I call parent leadership. People can call it different names depending on how they define what I'm saying. A parent has children, we'd like to assume out of love and with the desire that their children will thrive. And a parent will raise these children based on the child's abilities, personality, how they move. What that means is if the child is a high achiever, as a parent, you will shift things around, accumulate resources so that child has the best platform and opportunity. If your child is struggling, you will try and give them resources to help lift them up. If your child is problematic, rebellious, you will be strict. You will give them hidings, etc., because you want what's best for that child. And we can now superimpose this to a nation where the best leader is like a parent, like a father, like a mother, who says, I want my people to thrive. And the criminals that stole are my children too. These are also my children. It's not that they're not.
Yeah.
And it's how do I punish these children of mine? And if my children are so disastrous that they're killing my other children, maybe I must remove this child from the earth. As a loving parent, as painful as it is. Or let me rehabilitate. Or let me put them to work. Whatever the case may be. But you think of it always as, these are my children. And I love all of them. It may not be equal, of course, but generally. And the high-performing children, I'll give them everything they need to thrive. And the children struggling, I'll uplift them. And the problematic children, I will punish. But I also want them to get better. And if they can't get better, I need to find a way to remove them because they're then destroying the home. You've got a child who's a drug addict. They steal things in the home. They stab their siblings. They bring in their drug dealing and drug taking friends to burn the house. This child needs to go. I love them, but you'll literally call the police. Go isolate them away from the home. You don't keep them there or you start by giving them hidings, beating them, which someone's like, that's not love. You're like, I'm a parent. That's the first part. I wanted to say that I prefer parent leadership as a general. When people speak about capitalism, communism, all these isms, I'm like, are they behaving like a loving father or mother to you guys? Right. And if the answer is no, then it's not for me. You can package it however you want. Does Joe Biden love his black children in America like he loves his white children? And if he favors his white children over his black children, then he's not a good parent. He should favor the children that are helping him build a better family. He should be punishing the children that are destroying the family, being the United States of America. And that's how it should move. But if you're like, I prefer the girls over the boys, I prefer my gay children over my straight children, I prefer my white children over my black, you're not a good parent. And you're making your children hate each other as a parent. Naval. Is it Naval?
Yeah.
Ravikant. Yeah. My favorite, one of my favorite episodes on the Joe Rogan Experience quotes Nassim Taleb of the Black Swan, and I've remixed it to some degree, but I'm referencing him because this is what inspired it. I'm not going to quote exactly what Nassim said and what Naval said. Democracy, to answer the second part, democracy assumes a lot of things which in Africa don't hold, which is why it cannot serve Africa. Democracy is going back to parent leadership. You are a 60-year-old father, you've got a 30-year-old child, you've got a 15-year-old child, you've got a 3-year-old. Democracy dictates that all of these children have an equal vote and an equal say in the house, and it's equal to yours. So if the 2-year-old says, I want us to watch cartoons the whole day, and we will only eat sweets, and you happen to have twins, and those twins vote the same, and they outvote the 15-year-old who wants free Wi-Fi and wants to come home at 2 a.m, and they outvote the 30-year-old who's like, no, I'd like support in the family, I'd like my family to move in, etc., that I've made on the side. Those 2-year-olds outvote you guys, and you guys are forced to watch cartoons and eat sweets the whole day. That cannot hold, because the 2-year-olds don't know what they are doing. On the African continent, we have got a lot of undereducated people. And by education, I'm talking about knowledge. Having the knowledge of what political systems are, having the knowledge of how tax works, having a knowledge of the responsibilities of a leader, knowing the channels to go through when you're not being served, knowing how to remove problematic leaders, and then knowing how to do things for self. And you've got an Africa where a lot of people are highly dependent children, to a point where it doesn't matter whether you're a good father, bad father, strict, they always come home because it's the only place they can get food, even when you're whipping them. So they've become so dependent on social welfare and aid that they almost can't think. They don't have the privilege of thinking because their stomach is grumbling. So democracy cannot work in that instance. And I can tell you now, even in a family structure, democracy can't work until these kids have been educated or have struggled or understand this family business. We're voting, do we sell the family business or not? Your 12-year-old is like, sell it. Jeez, if we sell it, I get to buy a car. The 40-year-old child is like, no, we need to expand the family business, set up a trust, and ensure that competent people come in because they've seen life. Now, going back to Naval and Nassim Taleb and Naval Ravikant, they speak about when I'm with my family, I'm this. When I'm with my friends, I'm this. When I'm with the community, I'm this. And with strangers, I'm this.
Yeah.
I have sat with 100% full-blown capitalists. Come on, bro. Capitalism is the only thing that makes sense. I'm like, it cannot be. Anyone who doesn't support full-on capitalism is an idiot. He's an idiot. I'm like, no, we need some socialism. And no, never. Socialism stops what. And then I go and I say, you do realize that you are not a capitalist when it comes to your family and your friends. You're arguably a socialist hinging on communist. Because especially with your youngest kids, you are a dictator.
By the way, let's define these terms.
Do I know the definitions? I'll give you what I think the definitions are.
Right.
So capitalism, the easiest way to define them is, because there's different ways to define them, I'll define them based on government.
All right.
I think that's the easiest way for what I'm trying to say. So capitalism, extreme capitalism is no government or very minimal. And extreme communism is full on government. Almost no ability to create private, etc. And then socialism is the people. There's a government, but it's the people, what's best for the people and not for the private individual. So in extreme capitalism, the capitalists are the ones that decide if we need to build roads, if we must build a free clinic. If they don't with their money, no one gets it. If you're poor and you're struggling, shame, go suffer. The extreme communism is where the government is the parent. They dictate. It doesn't matter how hard you work, how much of inventive you are. We will decide that the children will go to school. Everyone will have food. Everyone will have the same type of house, etc. With socialism, the people own everything. So they're like, look, for the benefit of all of us, we'd like to take whatever we've accumulated and make sure that people have access to this, people have access to that. And maybe some people benefit a bit, etc., etc. So that's my understanding, at least from a government perspective. Other people will then give other definitions based on finance and economics, etc. I tell them, with your family, you're not a capitalist, because you don't move out the way and tell your kids, well, if you're suffering, shame, go find a way to make money. But dad, my school fees, find a way to make money, bro. I'm not going to pay your school fees. I'm a capitalist. Learn to be a capitalist. And then that child ends up stealing their father's car and they're like, well, I'm being a capitalist. They believe in some form of socialism, communism, that, look, my kids are still suffering or they're still young. I will fund their education, their food. I will give them a home. That's the government now and social welfare. And you're doing it until they are strong enough, educated enough to now begin being on their own and also giving back to the family for future generations. With your family, with people's family, most people are not capitalist. With friends, people tend to be socialist in the sense that I will help a friend where needed. I'll not feed you and house you, but if you're struggling, my man, you're my mate. Come to my house. If your kids need something, if your kids need a job, I'll give them a job. But I'm not Gaddafi. I'm not going to just give you money and give you access to my house and you can drive my car. I'll only help you as and when is needed. And then with strangers, they are capitalists. You see this with a big chunk of the Jewish community, the business Jewish community in South Africa, and the Muslim community. Jews and Muslims go to a point where they don't charge interest to each other with loans, but they invest in institutions that charge interest to others who are then the strangers. Indians, Muslims, Jewish people amongst each other, they could literally be like, take this. When you're good, you'll sort, but please take it. It's a cell phone, take the phone, use it. I know you need to rise up. If you ever get good, because I trust you, we know each other, we're family. The next person, they're like, don't even look at this phone unless you have the money. And not only the money, I'm going to charge a premium because I want to profit off of you. I want to exploit your labor and get the most I can from you. So from an African perspective, if we were to assume that Africa was a family, one family, and you look at our leadership, the African leaders, the politicians, the presidents, some of the kings, these people don't see Africans as their children. Because if they did, the first thing they'd do is remove democracy. They'd be like, look, we love you guys, man, but if we let you guys vote, seeing how poor and undereducated you are, we're going to destroy yourselves. So we will not let you vote. We will not give you democracy. What we will do as loving parents is we'll give you food. We'll make sure that the more capable children, the ones with the jobs and the businesses, through tax, we'll give you food. We'll give you a basic structure. And then once your survival needs, your physiological needs, Maslow's hierarchy at the bottom are sorted, we're going to have a very intentional drive on educating and upskilling you, because you can't live here forever, so that you can then join these guys. Once, as a general population, you guys are educated, then we can be like, okay, let's vote. You look at your dad, and there's 6 of you, his kids, boys and girls. You guys grow up and you get to a point where your dad is in his 70s and you guys are in your 20s, 30s. You guys are at a family meeting and where you guys would keep quiet. Now your dad is like, Renatus, what do you think? No, Dad, what I think is what. Why are you letting him speak? He's lived life. He's educated. He knows how to make money. He knows the cost of his decision. When the people are poor and undereducated, they don't know the cost of their decision. And that's why now this person is able to do that. Now, more developed nations who are also nefarious in how they move, they have more of an educated population. They don't really have struggle with the basic needs. They'll be like, oh, but look at America. Look at Europe. Obviously, democracy works. And I can go back to their history and be like, before you guys started thieving and killing and colonizing weaker nations under the guise of democracy, you guys didn't have democracy. But forget history. I go to the guy and I'm like, in your family, you don't exercise democracy. But you're telling me what's best for your family is not best for the continent. Means that you're not being genuine in what it is that you're coming to do here. You're here to come serve your real family, which could be your funders, where you have business interests, your real blood family, and some of your friends. That's actually who you're here to serve. Those are the people that you'll give opportunities to, you'll save, you'll help. But for everyone else, you treat them as strangers. And you're like, we will exploit and milk them to the nth degree because these are not my people. So a true leader and the best type of leadership for me is parent leadership. And if you do decide to become a leader, which I've tried and I'm seeing flames, you have to decide if you're going to work with agreeable children or if you want to bully people you see as your children that may not see themselves as your children. And that's where these concepts of dictatorship come in, where the person says, you will be my children, whether you like me or not, because I believe that this family will be best served with me at the helm. Other people go a bit softer and they say, look, who wants me to be their dad? Me. Let's go. Penuelism. Let's do the things. I will shout at you or whatever. If you ever feel you're too cool for me, it's fine. Run away from home. I'll disown you. Go find another dad. But I'm here for the children that want to work with me. And then you take it from there.
And more than 100K subscribers right now on your YouTube channel.
That's me.
Congratulations, brother.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah, nice. I think
Thank
people
so
are now
much.
listening,
Maybe not to me, but to the platform, yes.
That's good. Why the rebrand?
So I've got two platforms. The Penuel channel, which is my original channel. I make videos on my phone. I go live. I've done some ad hoc interviews. I've added a show they call Dope Conversations as well. That's my channel. I think it's got over 80,000 subscribers. And then I set up a channel with Tibogo Kibini of Tribal Media House called the Penuel Show, where I do one-on-one conversations like this. That one I think is over 120,000. I'm not sure where we're sitting now. Oh, you'll check, sorry. Yeah. So my partners always had a vision of building a network, almost like what Podcast and Chill has gotten right now, what the Daily Wire got right.
Oof, almost 200K, 172.
172?
Yeah.
On Convo?
Right.
Are you serious?
Yep.
Hectic. But I guess it's beautiful that I don't know because it means we're focused on the work.
That's true.
We're focused on the work.
Yeah.
And it proves that we're not chasing numbers. Utibucho wanted a network. DJ Sbu, when I was with him at the Hustlers Corner, also had a fantasy of a network. Podcast and Chill have done it. They've got Podcast and Chill. They've got Popcorn and Cheese. They've got a football show. At some point, they had a car show. At some point, I think they had a queer show. They've got a teens show now. I'm at 2000, you know. So Tibucho's always dreamt of that. Not Podcast and Chill. He more likes a channel called Vice, where there'd be like documentary type, hard-hitting interviews, etc., etc. And initially, I was very resistant. I was like, no, Joe Rogan Experience is my North Star. Keep it Joe Rogan Experience. Keep it simple. Let's keep it moving. And over time, you know, everyone has visions and it's nice to accommodate people where you can. So I decided to kind of let go. I was like, we'll make a deal. You can have the channel because I don't really care about the channel per se. And I'll keep the show. So the Penuel Show is mine and it sits now on Convo, which is now the channel. And hopefully sooner rather than later, you'll start seeing different types of content there that's not me. And the Penuel Show will exist on its own. To a point when, you know, me and Tebza have very frank conversations. From the beginning, we spoke about exit and fighting and money, which people always run away from. What happens when we fight?
Yeah.
What happens when we start making a lot of money? Right. What happens, you know? Yeah. And part of it is to protect both of us, to be like, look, if ever we fight, I'll leave with the Penuel Show. You can leave with Convo, as an example. If money comes in, is the money coming to the channel or is the money coming to the show? And how do we maneuver in that way? I think it's just a smarter way to move. It protects both of us so that at any given time, if we're like, fuck you, I hate you, piece of shit, we can divorce as amicably as possible because we've separated those things.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the reason for the rebrand. The hope is to have other stuff, because if it was the Penuel Show, but now you've got the theREN experience there, it's like, okay, the theREN experience on the Penuel Show, the Penuel Show on the Penuel Show. So we decided to call it Convo, and then when new content comes on, which it's not for me to say, but maybe I'll say if people can find Tribal Media House, hopefully they can start pitching some of their ideas to Debs, and who knows? Because I know he'd rather handpick people, but maybe you can charm him in some way and work with him, because you've seen the production level.
Yeah.
The cameras, the team,
I know.
kind of situation. So it would
be
be a really dope partnership. And one of my wishes, which probably won't happen, but if we can do it on a smaller collaboration level, is for some of these platforms to work together, man. We don't always have to work in silos. And the easiest way to do it is to visit each other's platforms, number one. But then number two, to get to a point where we can formalize Podcast and Chill, The Hustler's Corner, Nkululeko on Culture, SMWX, The Penuel Show. I know I'm forgetting a whole lot of others. The Venting Podcast, Kokos Koteni, all of these others. Formalize them, create a value, have accountants, and then allow some of us to buy a stake in them so that we genuinely want you to succeed. Because if you succeed, I make money, even though I own 5%. But you also own 5% of what I have. And all of us as an industry are now being uplifted because we all own a stake in what we're doing. If not that, then we set up, let's say, a neutral podcast where all of us have to serve time. You're like, one day in a month, you have to go and serve time because we all own this podcast. We all put in 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 Rand, 20,000 each per month, like a stokvel. And we're building an alternative media hub. Even though we're all working in isolation, it's also so that we can grow this thing together. But it should not be that we all work in silos, because it's one of the things specifically Black people need to work their way out of, to be like, how do we collaborate, but without stepping on each other's toes? And even if I hate you, I hate your guts, I hate the interviews you're doing, I hate the way you're going in, but I own 5%, and I kind of need you to succeed because I have a vested interest in your success. And in that way, we all grow.
No, I like that. And I think I also like the idea of, how do we fight? How do we share the money if it comes in?
That conversation is important. Discuss divorce before you get married.
Yeah. And how you fight. How is podcasting going for you?
Podcasting's been great for me, man. It's doing way better than I thought from when I started. Let's say 2022 officially, but end of 2021, but mostly 2022. The traveling I've done, the people I've met, the people that I've attracted, the little bit, because very little the money that we make on YouTube. Anyone who's on YouTube will know. The little bit of money that we've made has been phenomenal. And I've got a plan, and I'm kind of falling back on that plan, to be honest. So I need to step up, number one. Number two, the impact that some of the conversations I've had in real life has been very humbling for me, because it's what I wanted, but when it happens, So, for example, you and I speak about, let's say, building a bridge between Rwanda, South Africa, and Tanzania. And some people watch us speaking about it, and politicians, business people, activists reach out and they're like, we're actually hosting something, please come through. And we speak about it on our podcast. We're like, guys, that thing we wanted is actually happening. You're like, oh, snap. And somewhere our law gets changed because of a conversation we had. Somewhere a politician gets votes because of a conversation you had with them. That has been humbling for me. Number three has been the real impact it's had on my guests, where you are literally getting work, literally getting investors. I don't know if people are getting like intimate partners. I'm sure, some girls are like, hey, I saw you with Pen, so would you like to do coffee? Yeah, okay, sure. But the real impact that it's made on my guests, where people are like, bro, I've gotten work, I've gotten booked, My order book is full till the end of the year because people saw me sitting with you. I've been booked in Spain. I've been invited to come and speak at this thing. It's a paid gig. I've met up with this person who's invested in the thing I'm doing. And I'm like, that's dope. And I wish more guests could know where my heart is and where I sit. Because part of the problem we have is the lack of honesty. You've got I want to make this example. I'll make it because I made a video about it. A guy that I know personally, I won't say we're friends, but I know personally, and I chat to him, Likau Sihuana of Drip. It's a retail brand now and it's a group, but known for their sneakers. Has been in the news for weird things, sad things rather, divorce with his wife or going through a divorce. The wife claiming that he's not maintaining the child. Drip might be struggling financially and I'm using him just as an example. I'm not saying this should happen. But if you were to find other people in similar situations to be like, I would like to come on the platform and actually genuinely speak about my business story, where we're falling short, we need funding, we need government to assist. We're looking for assistance, my wife and I, or my ex-wife and I, to solve things. And literally from that sit down, lawyers contact them pro bono. We'd like to resolve this thing. Funders come and say, no, man, we can shift these things around. Let's convert your debt to equity. We'll take the hit and we can restructure this thing. This is where you're falling short. You've got a supply that's too expensive. We've got suppliers in Vietnam that can resolve this issue. We've got friends who own malls. We can get your brand in there, and we'll give you 2 years, no lease. You don't pay. And then later on, we can always catch up or resolve. And you're like, it took that sit down with TheREN to actually attract these people. And I didn't know the power of this thing. I think somewhere along the line, I'm going to have to get some of these people I'm mentioning now to maybe sit with me or make videos where they're like, since I've been on the Penuel Show, these are the things that have happened in my life. Right. So I'd just like to say thank you to Penuel, or guys, please fund his platform, whatever the case may be, and try and make it a culture because, hey, bro, thank you for what you did. I appreciate it. It's like, no, that's fine, but let people know so that they see the value. Because it will allow me to get other guests that maybe I wouldn't have gotten. It will allow people to actually be like, geez, we need to fund this platform because it's actually doing work. It will allow ignorant people to be like, all you guys do is talk. No, we don't only talk, but maybe we need to tell you the other things we're doing so that you actually know we're not just talking. And that's important for me.
Yeah, we go back to telling stories again. Yeah. Until next time, thank you.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your audience. And I'm looking forward to watching you grow. As I said, if we can make this a tradition, either every year or every 6 months, that would be dope. And the challenge is on me and you, by the way, to try and have this in other African countries.
Yeah, I don't see why not.